Live from deep in an underground bunker in East Tennessee, this is America's premier mortgage fuel services expert, Paul Williams.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of Foreclosurepedia Podcast. Foreclosurepedia Podcast presentation of the Foreclosurepedia Radio Network, which premieres weekly. The time is 1900 hours Eastern Daylight Time. The date, 17 April. The biggest thing that's on everybody's mind out there today is SEAS LLC. SEAS LLC and the epicenter of the House of Fraud, which has converged upon Florida. Make no mistake whatsoever, ladies and gentlemen, SEAS LLC going forward will be reflective of how labor will or will not address fraud. We're getting a lot of information out there about the final days, if you will, of SEAS actually up and running, about how all of its employees were scrambling to get over to other firms. We're hearing PrimeStar took on a bunch of them. Robert Kapeluk over at Tower Preservation LLC took on some of them. We're receiving information that up to the last day, which SEAS LLC employees were operating, Altisource sent checks. They sent checks to SEAS LLC, including 18 hours prior, plus or minus, to SEAS closing its doors. The house of fraud that Altisource has allowed to grow over the past 3 years is monumental. And what this means to me is that in addition to the employees of SEAS LLC, like Michelle Nicholas, whom knew SEAS LLC was financially insolvent, and from what I hear is now working with Robert Kapeluk over at Tower Preservation LLC, Altisource has facilitated one of the largest conspiracies to commit fraud ever recorded. Now I want to quantify that statement because what I am saying here is, for almost 3 years now, Altisource has had information in its possession as a company by and through its former Associate General Counsel. So we're not talking about Pat McTaggart here. The same Pat McTaggart who, there's no other term I can put to this. In her racially biased manner, in her Uncle Tom actions, Pat McTaggart has been the tip of the spear each and every time that the honest and innocent men and women of labor have attempted to come forward and say, hey, you know what? We're getting fucked. But no. SEAS has known for 3 years precisely the manner in which this fraud occurs, precisely whom has been committing this fraud, and has stood by and done nothing. Absolutely nothing. For Altisource to come forward, and say that Pat McTaggart is handling anything, this is disingenuous. While that shit may fly in Luxembourg with the rest of the faggots cheering each other with the champagne, it doesn't fly in the United States. United States law and European law are two different creatures. Now, Altisource has actually reached out to multiple members of labor, confirmed the accusations. And what does that mean, in my opinion, to confirm an accusation? It means that you document the fact that something fucking went down. And in this case, a lot of fucking something went down. So while Pat McTaggart is sending emails to multiple members of labor that SEAS LLC would not be paid, while Pat McTaggart confirmed that on phone calls to members of labor that SEAS LLC would not be paid until labor was paid. The reality is that she, as an agent or an employee of Altisource, has set the stage for potential pending charges against herself and Altisource. McTaggart needs to understand something, at least the way I understand the world I live in. It doesn't matter who the fuck you work for. All right? It doesn't matter that somebody gives you orders to do something. When you know for a fact that what is ongoing is illegal, there's no difference between what McTaggart is trying to do now and say, I was given orders, I don't know anything, and the Nuremberg defense that occurred in World War II. And this is where the Nazi soldiers, everybody who was over there killing the Jews and the gypsies and everybody else at Auschwitz and all those neat little fucking camps, no, that didn't fly. You know where they were sent? They were sent to the gallows. That's right, they were hung and hung until fucking dead. So you can't just say or turn a blind eye or pretend you don't know something when you possess that. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm not a judge, albeit I was in the Jay Gazinski matter, wherein he submitted himself. He and a member of labor both submitted themselves to my jurisdiction. And rulings were made, and Pat McTaggart actually has copies of those. Because Altisource requested those copies. You know, this has been going on for a long time. And when I say a long time, we're going all the way back to 2013. And we're not just talking about Altisource here. We're talking across the board. We're talking Mid-Ohio. We're talking Mikan. We're talking Safeguard Properties. We're talking MCS at some levels. We're talking CoreLogic that's been gobbled up. We're talking Cyprex. The only difference between all the aforementioned and Altisource is the fact that Altisource, in its own ignorance, in my opinion, actually started paying people. But did they pay them what they owed? Absolutely not. They paid them 40 cents on the dollar and forced them to never speak with anybody about it. You know, here's the reality. If you hired SEAS LLC employees after the spinning down, the defraudment of labor, we're going to find you. I am going to find your company. I'm going to write about your company every day that I find new and prolific information on you. I'm going to drill down so deep, you have to go to a proctologist to sit down over the next year when I'm done. Why? Because if you're hiring employees whom were present during one of the most massive, the largest scale fraud operation that at least I've been able to find, to date, involving Tom Newkirk and Robert Kapeluk, then those same people you're bringing into your environment are going to continue with that same mentality. You go on all the way back 2013, Altisource knew there was problems at SEAS, and specifically both Tom Newkirk and Robert Kapeluk knew this. Even today, we have the copies now of the checks that bounced, one of which was over $10,000. If I write a $100 check and it bounces, I'm going to jail. I'm going to jail. So membership within the National Association of Mortgage Field Services regime does not give you a pass. Because you've held Eric Miller's hand, perhaps in a darkened hallway, doesn't give you a pass. Here is the reality. There's a well-documented chain of emails between the former Altisource Associate General Counsel in Luxembourg and myself. And, you know, had it simply been a SEAS LLC issue, you know, had there been multiple people involved at the helm, if you will, of dealing with the rising tide of fraud besides McTaggart, then perhaps I could chalk it up to something else other than racial bias by McTaggart. Because in my opinion, hey, I'm going to call a spade a spade. I think McTaggart hates white people. I'll be blunt about that. You know, so McTaggart can get all up there, all Sharpton and poverty pimp about her fucking shit. Here's the reality. The vast majority of the people whom were defrauded were white. And to date, Pat McTaggart, as far as the public record reflects, has done not a goddamn thing to help them. In fact, Pat McTaggart has now reached out and stated, we were going to give y'all settlements, fuck y'all. It goes to the lawyers. Really? Man, that's a straight up I'll belay my last. McTaggart has been the only person to date who has liaised with labor in the interactions for the fraud that has been committed on behalf and by and through Altisource prime vendors. Let me give you a quote. Let me give you a quote of what the former Altisource General Counsel wrote to me while still working over in Luxembourg. This is with respect, and may I set the stage, Heather Berghorst, the former and now disgraced Secretary of the National Association of Mortgage Field Services. This is the same fucking hag who screamed and begged and had lawyers, sick lawyers upon me in an attempt to sue me for federal racketeering, screaming she paid everybody, she wasn't financially insolvent. Lo and behold, what do we find out? Well, fuck. Berghorst files her not first, second bankruptcy. I didn't buy it. Fifth Third Bank, who is suing her for willful and malicious injury, didn't buy it. But here's what Altisource's former Associate General Counsel had to say, quote, Berghorst is a tough deal. Supposedly from what our VMO group is telling me, they have moved all of Altisource business to the new entity Heritage Home Solutions. I think VMO thinks if they slowly stage them down, it will keep the subs paid and we can wind them down to zero. If you hear otherwise, please let me know. End quote. Now I want you to think about that for just a moment. Here, Altisource is at that time Associate General Counsel, one of only, I think, 8 or 10 over there in Luxembourg. This man is stating he knows for a fact that Berghorst Enterprises, whom at that point in time Altisource had pulled all their work from, had spun up a new company called Heritage Home Solutions. And in fact, ladies and gentlemen, at that same period of time, Heritage Home Solutions did not exist. Didn't exist at all. But apparently Altisource didn't care about that. Didn't care at all. Nobody appeared to care. And to this day, the National Association of Mortgage Field Services regime doesn't care as well. Why? Shit, Berghorst still on the books as a member in good standing. So what this message is sending is this. If you commit prolific fraud, if you destroy the lives of honest men and women of labor, you're going to be protected. You're going to be protected by what I can only deem as a criminal enterprise known as NAMPS. No two ways about it. I mean, not the way I see it. And I'm going to go way out on a limb here and state if this was put in front of a grand jury, and hell, let me argue the matter. Fuck it, let me argue it. I think not only are payments going to would be forthcoming, indictments would be handed down. But it wasn't just SEAS, albeit SEAS is what's up there in front of everybody right now. And I want to stress that, see, because everybody is just kind of thinking that, wow, you know what? So SEAS fucked some people, no big deal. The company collapsed, but that's not it. going all the way back into 12 and 13 with Jay Gazinski. Jay Gazinski, the proprietor of Michigan Realty Solutions. All right. Jay Gazinski submitted on his application to NAMPS that Altisource, was officially sponsoring him. And that was a lie. Altisource's former associate general counsel reached out directly to NAMPS. And posed the question, why? Because Altisource doesn't sponsor anybody. Altisource doesn't co-sign anybody's ass. And whether it was Eric Miller or Liz Ziotz or whoever the fucking two-bit hack was at NAMPS, what they had to say was, well, we don't verify the letters or anything. We just called to verify, and you guys did tell us that you sponsored him. What? No, Altisource didn't sponsor anybody. NAMPS knew it from the beginning. NAMPS knew that Jay Gazinski was having problems paying people or purposefully was not paying people. Jay went out on a fraud binge, to make the mafia blush. This little pretend gangster thug who thinks he's about something up in fucking Michigan. And what did Altisource do? Absolutely nothing. Continued to send him money, checks, everything. And when Jay got pissed off, let me give you a quote. This comes from 27th of October, 2014 at 14:45 hours Central Standard Time. Jay Gazinski wrote, quote, anyone who feels legal action is necessary, feel free to let me know so we can hold your funds. So let me get this straight. So now NAMPS, members of NAMPS, and Altisource are all going to support, through their acquiescence, through their silence, the fact that if somebody chooses to participate in their constitutionally guaranteed civil rights, you're going to go ahead and keep the money from them anyway. At that point in time, everybody should have stepped to the plate and said, we have a fucking problem, bring this cocksucker in, and let's get a fucking honest statement. But they couldn't. They couldn't because Eric Miller's pay was dependent upon these conspiracies coming to fruition. And I want to couch that properly. Because of the fact that if Jay could not make money, Jay could not continue to pay NAMPS, Eric Miller had a vested interest in ensuring Jay, along with a lot of other people, Berghorst, Buchek, Carol Boyd, the list can go on and on ad nauseum, had a vested interest to ensure that they were all carried as members in good standing within the NAMPS rolls. Because that's what pays his salary. Now, personally, and I have nothing documented that would lend credence to this. Personally, I feel Eric Miller is on the take. He's on the dole. That's my belief. I don't believe that you're centrally involved in all of this fucking shit. And it's just a coincidence that you're the only voice that continues to refuse to allow ethics investigations. In fact, ethics investigations that have been requested by members of NAMPS at the highest levels. We talk a little bit about the Bucheks. Everybody, Google them. Google their office up in Derby, New York. So they're getting ready to sell all that off. Might even be closed at the time that this actually goes live. Where are they today and what's going on? Let me give you a quote from somebody whom was very close to the Bucheks. Quote, well, that's funny because their parents actually owned the whole strip. Now, that's referencing the actual offices, that and ACA management that's being sold off. They moved down to Georgia around last June, working with Beers Housing out of Georgia. Let me interrupt here. Anybody out there who can hear my voice, if you have any information on Beers Housing, I want it. I don't care if it's good, bad. I don't care what it is. You got pictures of these people. I want them. He used to be a contractor for Buchek before starting out on his own. This is referring to Beers Housing. That's as much as I know. I heard he was planning on moving back to New York, as also his darling is going to be in a movie coming out soon. That's referencing his wife. I think the case is pretty clear cut. You know what I mean? At least from where I sit and how I view it. Altisource is completely to blame. Now, Altisource, the way I interpret federal law, and because of the fact that multiple levels, both within its own structure and within, the subsidiary structure going all the way to Aquin, those people were involved with federal finance. They were involved with mortgages. They were involved with servicing. They had a legal and ethical obligation to perform due diligence, not after people like me had sent not 1, not 10, not 20, but hundreds of emails attesting to millions of dollars in fraud. No, they had the legal and ethical obligation to be performing due diligence when they onboarded each and every one of their prime vendors, and quarterly thereafter. I believe the law is quite clear on that fact, and additionally, the information which they possess, that information is instrumental to potential criminal cases going forward. For Altisource ever to get away from that which has been going on within it, whether we're talking about the Bill Irby bullshit up with fucking Aquin, whether we're talking about Altisource Residential, whom incidentally just got hit on two, count them, class action lawsuits for the fraud, the insanity, the kickback schemes. To get away from that, you got to step to the plate and you got to get honest. If you don't want to pay the bills on these companies that you gave money to and that you entrusted with your contract, and let me drill down just there a bit. So there's a great thing called the doctrine of privity. You can't have it one way and not the other. What I mean by this is, so you take Tom Newkirk. Tom Newkirk, SEAS, had a doctrine of privity with Altisource. They had a legal contract going on. Both SEAS and Altisource are saying now that labor had no doctrine of privity with Altisource. And in some cases, that may be true. But on the one hand, you cannot say that you're going to compensate people upon fucking jobs and you do not want them to open their mouth, while in the same breath, in the last hours of the existence of SEAS, sending tens upon tens of thousands of dollars to their coffers and saying, oops, no party, no foul. There's a fucking doctrine of privity. Why? Because SEAS doesn't exist anymore. Either on the one hand, SEAS exists, and they are going to step in and block litigation against Altisource, or SEAS does not exist, and they get to go run and play with the money. I don't know. I'm not the fucking jury. But I'll also tell you something else in closing on this first segment in Foreclosurepedia's podcast. I'll tell you this, labor is to blame. And I mean that. And I mean everybody that was hemmed up in that mess of SEAS. Labor really is to blame. They are to blame because of the fact that none of them, not a single one of them, had the fucking nuts, A, to go public, and B, to go to law enforcement. Now, that's going to sting. And I really don't care if it stings. I don't exist. I don't do what I do to fight battles for fucking labor. I don't do what I do to assist management in doing anything for themselves. I exist and I do what I do to to ensure that eventually there will be a semi-level landscape in the mortgage field services industry. End of conversation. Stop. The arguments cannot be rebutted. Why? Because they are the truth. And that is that which nobody wants. Labor, on the one hand, wants to piss and moan, and you go to the website. I'm getting ready to release everybody's, and I mean everybody's email addresses. Why? There's no difference between looking through your kitchen window into your neighbor's window and seeing, a spouse or a significant other assaulting the other spouse or a child and not reporting it. There's no difference. Because as labor continues to keep a muzzle on its own mouth, labor hurts those whom do not even know that they have the legal right to fight. Labor, in the instant case, in my opinion, is 60% guilty. Because each and every one of you whom hears my voice tonight, who has actually sent all your information to me and continued to scream that, no, we can't say anything about it, here's the reality. All of you people have knowledge about ongoing crimes. And the only reason you're not wanting to go public, don't act like, oh, Paul's such a fucking dick. Here's the reality. You don't want to go public because it might impact your bank account. That's what it is. Don't get up on your Facebook fucking pulpits and fucking try to preach some bullshit. You would gladly allow your fellow worker to get fucked to ensure you might get another shot at the lottery. And make no mistake, that's what this business is. This business isn't a legitimate industry. This is a lottery. You're rolling the dice every single time you go out and do a fucking work order. Make no mistake about that. No mistake about that. And with the volumes getting ready to tick up, and with the fact that there is not skilled labor really left out there today, and that's what we're going to discuss in our second segment tonight. Make no mistake whatsoever. All of you who kept your mouths shut when you could have opened them, you guys are going down the same path as well. You're going to be bankrupt. You're going to be bankrupt. You're going to be bankrupt while Newkirk and Kapeluk hawk it up and get big smiles. And while you're the one running the cardboard sign out there begging for fucking money, they're going to be the ones throwing trash outside of their Ferrari onto you. It's the reality. It's the facts. It's the end of this first segment. Time is 19:30 hours. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. As usual, you may reach me on Google Plus at D. Paul Williams, LinkedIn, Paul Williams, and the LinkedIn group Property Preservation Consortium, Twitter, Foreclosurepedia. We stream all our podcasts on iTunes, Foreclosurepedia. We have our screencasts over on YouTube, the Foreclosurepedia channel, and always at foreclosurepedia.org. We'd like to give a special shout out to Amazon.com, whom provides our S3 podcast and video storage, and Cloudflare for hosting Foreclosurepedia in 24 different geo-positioned servers, pro bono as well. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to give me a shout out, COO at foreclosurepedia.org.